In September 1997, Amanda Dawn Galleon moved with her family from Kansas City to Gillette, Wyoming. At first, only her mother moved to be near her dying mom, but eventually the whole family followed. Amanda, who was just 14 years old at the time, was upset about leaving her friends behind. At the end of that month, she attempted to run away but returned home the next day. This, however, was just the beginning of the Gallion family's troubles. Just 6 weeks after the move, on the morning of October 13th, Amanda left home with her bicycle and set off for school, but she never arrived. Her parents were unaware of her absence until 6 p.m. when the school called, informing them that Amanda's bike had been found by the side of the road, near the I-90. Investigators initially suspected that Amanda had run away and shifted their focus to a 20-year-old man named Patrick Lee Gearing. Gearing had shown romantic interest in Amanda, something her parents, Don and Sissy Gallion, strongly disapproved of. Despite this, they knew Amanda occasionally snuck out to meet him. After being questioned, Gearing could not provide any useful information and claimed he last saw her at 7:15 a.m. the day she disappeared. Although investigators suspected Gearing might be hiding Amanda, they had no evidence to hold him and eventually released him. Less than a week later, on October 19th, Gearing was also reported missing. His red pickup truck was found abandoned, facing the wrong direction on the road. Gearing's father discovered the truck, brought it back home, and then contacted the police. Inside the truck, investigators found 2 watches and a handwritten letter from Amanda, expressing her frustrations over the move. One of the watches belonged to Amanda, a gift from her late grandmother. Despite these clues, the investigation made little progress. Over the years, tips came in, with reported sightings of Amanda in Kansas City, Florida, and Montana, but none were confirmed. The most persistent report involved Amanda being seen with a blue car with Wyoming plates, but the car was never traced. However, in 2000, Amanda's case was reopened after investigators in Montana identified Nathaniel Bergeon as a potential suspect. Bergeon, a convicted child predator, had a long history of crimes against children, including the abduction and presumed murder of 10-year-old Zachary Ramsey in 1996. Notably, Bergeon had traveled from Montana to Gillette the day before Amanda disappeared. Despite this suspicious connection, no evidence linking Bergeon to Amanda's case was ever found, and he died in prison in 2008 while serving a sentence for unrelated crimes. Another potential suspect emerged in 2007, James Strahl, who was in jail awaiting trial for the murder of a man named William O'Hare. According to another inmate, Strahl confessed to picking up Amanda while she was hitchhiking, raping her, and killing her after she rejected his advances. Although Strahl's employment record suggested he was absent from work around the time of Amanda's disappearance, no further evidence has corroborated his confession, and he maintains his innocence. To this day, both Amanda Galleon and Patrick Gearing remain missing. Since they disappeared, neither of their social security numbers have been used, so they haven't applied for jobs, gotten driver's licenses, or opened credit accounts since 1997. Amanda was 14 years old when she went missing. She stood 5 feet 2 inches, weighed 100 pounds, and had blonde hair and blue eyes, though her hair had been dyed black at the time. If still alive, Amanda would be 38 years old today. Patrick Gearing, 20 years old at the time of his disappearance, was 5 feet 5 inches, weighed 160 pounds, and had brown hair and brown eyes. He also had a scar on his right temple and a partially developed right ear. He would now be 44 years old. If you have any information regarding Amanda's disappearance, you can contact the Gillette Police Department at 307-682-5155. For information regarding Patrick Gearing, please contact the Campbell County Sheriff's Office at 307-682-7271. Ruth Wilson was born on January 31, 1979. She was the eldest daughter of Ian and Nesta Wilson and lived in Dorking, Surrey. Ruth had a younger sister named Jenny. In 1982, Ruth's mother tragically died, and the children were initially told she had fallen down the stairs. However, as Ruth grew older, she discovered the true nature of her mother's death. It was by suicide. In 1983, Ruth's father, Ian, remarried a woman named Karin. Both were teachers, with Ian serving as the head of science at a secondary school. Growing up, Ruth enjoyed reading, riding her bike, and playing music. She was a budding musician, skilled at both the electric guitar and piano. Ruth was also a popular babysitter in her local neighborhood and worked a Saturday job in a music shop. From the outside, everything seemed well in Ruth's life. She was doing well in school, attended her local church where she sang in the choir and played the organ, and was described by her peers as quirky, intelligent, and maintaining a small group of friends. One of Ruth's friends during this time was Catherine Mayer, who was planning to move to Sheffield, Yorkshire. Ruth had asked if she could join Catherine once she was settled. During this time, Ruth had also recently slept over at Catherine's house and was adamant about not wanting to return home, though she did not explain why. Catherine later mentioned that she and Ruth had discussed running away from home, but never talked about taking their own lives. Ruth's father, Ian, and stepmother, Karin, disputed claims that Ruth was unhappy. On November 25, 1995, Ruth worked her job at the music shop and then went for a meal with her ex-boyfriend, Will Kennedy, with whom she still maintained a good friendship, and another friend named Neil Phillipson. The friends noted that Ruth paid for the meal. The next day, November 26, Ruth attended church for handbell practice, a tradition of ringing the church bells by hand. Afterward, she went to a youth group in Dorking. That evening, she had supper at Will Kennedy's home, where his mother gave Ruth some old clothing. The family recalled Ruth being relaxed, noting nothing out of the ordinary. On November 27, Ruth's father and stepmother both left for work early, leaving Ruth and Jenny to catch the bus. Ian recalled that the last time he saw Ruth, she was listening to her Walkman. He was in a stressful mood due to an Ofsted inspection at his school that day and remembered his last words to Ruth being, "Out of my way, I'm in a hurry," as he pushed past her. At that moment, Ruth informed Jenny that she would not be getting the bus with her, which wasn't unusual for Ruth as she was in the 6th form. However, Jenny was surprised Ruth had left it so late to tell her. After Jenny left for school, Will arrived and offered Ruth a lift, but she declined, saying she would see him later. Ruth did not attend school that day, which was out of character for her. She was last seen around 11:30 a.m., taking a taxi into Dorking. Around midday, she ordered flowers for her stepmother from a florist on the high street, but asked that they not be delivered until the following Wednesday. Ruth spent the afternoon in the library, and around 4 p.m., took a taxi to Box Hill, a beauty spot in Surrey, known for its picturesque countryside. Despite the rain, the taxi driver noted Ruth's strange behavior, as she simply stood still in the rain after being dropped off, appearing to look around as if waiting for someone. The taxi driver was the last person to see Ruth. On the day she disappeared, Ruth was wearing a red jumper, black trousers, and a lady's watch on her left wrist. She was carrying a blue duffel bag, her Walkman, and some tapes. Concern arose when Ruth did not return home that evening, and her family discovered she had not attended school that day. They contacted the police, who launched a search of the local area using information from the taxi firm. That night, a wider search was organized using a helicopter, police dogs, and infrared equipment to search the area in and around Box Hill, but nothing was found. It later emerged that Ruth frequently visited Box Hill after school and that she might have been concerned about her performance at school, as she had kept a school report hidden from her father and stepmother that weekend. On November 29th, the flowers Ruth ordered for her stepmother arrived, but without a note. Ruth's friend Catherine interpreted this as a sticking 2 fingers up gesture at her stepmother. Liam Macaulay, who was investigating the disappearance, speculated that Ruth was dressed to get into another car, or she was standing still, waiting for the taxi to leave so the driver did not see where she was going, implying that she might have been meeting someone who was helping her run away. The current belief falls into one of two possibilities: that Ruth went to Box Hill to meet someone and has gone away, or that she went up there and met with some form of harm. These views are shared by Mark Williams Thomas, who was the family liaison and is an investigative journalist. Surrey police have stated that the investigation would be reopened if any new evidence about Ruth's whereabouts comes to light. The investigation is codenamed Operation Scholar and is led by DCI Alex Geldart. Ian and Karin appeared on ITV's This Morning to appeal for any information, expressing their belief that Ruth is alive but afraid to come home. There have been a few possible sightings of Ruth since her disappearance. A girl resembling Ruth was captured on CCTV at a Dorking newsagent a couple of miles from Box Hill. The girl appeared distressed and requested a copy of each of the local newspapers, becoming visibly upset when informed that one of them was sold out. The shop owner reported this to the police and provided the CCTV footage. Ruth's parents believe the girl in the video was their daughter. On the 10th anniversary of Ruth's disappearance, Sergeant Shane Craven, head of Surrey's missing persons team, stated, "In the weeks following Ruth's disappearance, there were some reliable sightings of her in the Dorking area by those who knew her well. Sightings have also been reported as far away as Canada." In 2006, Ian wrote an open letter to Ruth, imploring her to come home and asking if anyone had any information. It was noted by her friend Roxy Birch that Ruth did not drive, nor did she have a passport, which would have made long-distance travel difficult. In 2018, John Savell, Chief Superintendent of Public Protection, reviewed the case, stating, "There are 5 explanations for Ruth's disappearance: a tragic accident, abduction, suicide, murder, or she had absented herself to start a new life. If Ruth is still alive, let's hope she is safe." On the evening of April 9, 2009, 21-year-old Alyssa Angelique Mclemore was last heard from around 6:30 p.m. At the time, she lived with her mother, Gracie, and her grandmother, Barbara, in Kent, Washington. Alyssa was away from home when her grandmother called to inform her that Gracie's health was rapidly declining due to a terminal autoimmune disease. Barbara urged Alyssa to come home, to spend time with her mother, who didn't have much time left. Alyssa promised to return to see her mother, but tragically, she never made it home. A witness later reported seeing Alyssa that day, near 30th Avenue South in Kent, an area known for the presence of sex workers and their clients. Alyssa had previously been arrested for prostitution. The witness described seeing a green pickup truck, possibly a 1990s model with Oregon license plates, approach Alyssa. Another witness reported seeing her with an older white man, in his 50s or 60s, who was about 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed between 175 and 185 pounds. This man also drove a green pickup truck. It is unclear whether he was involved in Alyssa's disappearance, but she has not been seen since. 3 days later, on April 12, Gracie passed away. Alyssa's family tried to contact her to inform her of her mother's death, but they were unable to reach her. Although they attempted to file a missing persons report on April 9, the police required them to wait 24 hours. On April 10, at 9:15 p.m., a chilling 911 call was received from Alyssa's phone. The dispatcher recalled hearing a woman pleading for help, while a male voice in the background commanded her to come here, and made threatening remarks, possibly saying, "I'll kill you or I'll hurt you." Despite the urgency of the call, the exact location of Alyssa's phone could not be pinpointed, as it lacked a GPS sensor. Investigators believe the call originated in the Kent area, but neither the caller nor the man in the background has ever been identified. Alyssa's phone went out of service shortly after the call. Alyssa Mclemore remains missing, and her case is unsolved. She is described as a devoted mother who would never willingly abandon her 3-year-old daughter, who was staying with her father, Alyssa's boyfriend, at the time of her disappearance. Alyssa was last seen in Kent, Washington, on April 9, 2009. She is a biracial female, half African American and half Native American, with naturally black hair and brown eyes, though she was often seen with blonde hair in photos. She has a scar on her abdomen, stands between 5 feet 1 inch and 5 feet 3 inches tall, and weighed around 130 pounds at the time she disappeared. If she is still alive, Alyssa would now be 35 years old. Anyone with information about her case is urged to contact the Kent Police Department at 253-856-5800. Karin Mero and Hannah Zaccaglini. Karin Elizabeth Mero was last seen in McLeod, California, on February 15, 1997. She was spotted on the front porch of a home on Minnesota Avenue, a residence belonging to Edward Ed Henline Sr., her boyfriend's father, and his wife. Karin and her boyfriend, Ed Jr., were also living at the property. Investigators later noted that Karin did not get along with her boyfriend's father, and they frequently fought. This was the last known sighting of Karin, and she has never been seen or heard from again. Adding to the complexity of her case, Karin was not reported missing until October 1997, a full 8 months after she vanished. Reportedly, law enforcement initially believed that the 27-year-old had left of her own accord, especially since there was a warrant out for her arrest. However, as weeks turned into months with no trace of her, concern grew that something far more sinister might have occurred. Just 4 months after Karin went missing, 15-year-old Hannah Marie Zaccaglini also vanished from McLeod, California. She was last seen leaving her boyfriend's apartment around 10 p.m. on the night of June 4, 1997. Hannah intended to return to her family's home on Minnesota Avenue, just a few blocks away, but she never made it and was never seen or heard from again. Initially, authorities believed Hannah might have run away, given her parents' recent divorce and her breakup with her boyfriend, who was moving away with his family. However, like in Karin's case, investigators were unable to find any evidence that Hannah was still alive after the night she disappeared, leading them to suspect foul play. Detectives also learned that Hannah had not argued with her family at the time she went missing, and had left the majority of her belongings behind, including her beloved bass guitar, clothing, handbag, and money. Her family does not believe she left voluntarily, and her mother later claimed that the police were prejudiced against her and did not thoroughly investigate the case when Hannah first went missing. Shortly after, it came to light that Ed Henline Sr. and his wife may have been the last people to see Hannah before she disappeared. With law enforcement now aware of 2 women who had gone missing near the Henline property, they questioned the family and searched the residence. In 2012, both Ed Henline Sr. and his son, Ed Jr., were charged with Hannah's murder. However, the charges were swiftly dropped 6 months later, in May of 2013, due to a lack of evidence. The police have noted that charges could be reinstated if more evidence becomes available. Both cases remain unsolved, but the Henlines continue to be suspects in the disappearances. In 1998, Henline Sr. and his wife, Deborah, were arrested on suspicion of forging Karin's disability checks. They pled guilty to perjury, were ordered to pay nearly $1,900 to the Siskiyou County Human Services Agency, and were placed on probation for 3 years. The following year, the couple was arrested on drug and weapon charges after a probation search of their home was conducted. They were subsequently sentenced to 120 days in jail and placed on further probation. Sadly, Karin's father, Robert, passed away in 2011. Karin Mero was last seen on February 15, 1997, on Minnesota Avenue in McLeod, California. She is described as a white woman with brown hair and green eyes, with a scar on her face near her nose, and a surgical scar from a liver transplant. Her upper front row of teeth is capped. She is 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed around 170 pounds at the time of her disappearance. Karin is classified as disabled and had a liver transplant in 1994. She regularly took anti-rejection drugs and other prescribed medicines, but she has not refilled her prescription since she went missing. If she is still alive, she would be 54 years old. 15-year-old Hannah Zaccaglini was last seen on June 4, 1997, in McLeod, California, when she left her boyfriend's apartment and headed home along Minnesota Avenue. She is described as a white woman with brown hair and brown eyes, though she had dyed her hair black at the time of her disappearance. Hannah has a birthmark behind her right ear, near her hairline, and a chickenpox scar near her right eye. Her upper left front tooth was chipped when she vanished, and her ears were pierced. She is 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighed around 120 pounds when she was last seen. If Hannah is still alive, she would be 41 years old. If you have any information about either of these cases, please contact the Siskiyou County Sheriff's Office at 530-842-8300. Edward and Stefania Andrews were a well-known couple from Arlington Heights, Illinois, a prosperous suburb outside of Chicago. In the 1970s, Arlington Heights was home to many affluent families and successful individuals, including Edward, a bookkeeper and manager at a Chicago manufacturing firm, and his wife Stefania, a credit investigator. Stefania was also actively involved in the Women's Auxiliary Beverage Institute. On the evening of May 15, 1970, the Andrews attended a cocktail party hosted by the Women's Institute at the Sheridan Hotel in Chicago. The couple arrived at the event around 5:30 p.m., in high spirits, ready to enjoy the night. However, party attendees noticed that Edward soon began to act strangely. He complained of hunger and appeared unwell, staggering around. By 9:30 p.m., the couple decided to leave the party early. They headed toward their 1969 Oldsmobile, which had been parked in the hotel's garage. What followed next was puzzling and concerning. According to the hotel valet, Edward appeared disoriented and was stumbling as he made his way to the car. Stefania, sitting in the passenger seat, was seen crying. Despite the valet's concerns, Edward managed to drive the car out of the garage, though he reportedly hit the garage door on his way out. The valet also witnessed Edward making an illegal turn, driving south in the northbound lanes of Michigan Avenue, toward the Michigan Avenue Bridge and Wacker Drive. Despite this erratic behavior, no one immediately called the authorities. The couple's absence wasn't noticed until the following Monday, May 18, 1970, when both Edward and Stefania failed to show up for work. Concerned colleagues reported them missing, and Arlington Heights police launched an investigation. Investigators speculated that Edward may have lost control of the vehicle and accidentally driven into the Chicago River. This theory was supported by skid marks and scrapes found on a bridge along Lower Wacker Drive. Despite thorough searches of the river, no trace of the couple, or their car, was ever found. Over the years, investigators received numerous tips, but none provided substantial leads. In 1994, an informant claimed that Edward and Stefania's bodies had been dumped in a pond near Green Oaks, Lake County, Illinois, by a group of young men. Despite a renewed search effort in the area, no evidence was discovered to support the claim. Now, more than 5 decades later, the disappearance of Edward and Stefania Andrews remains an unsolved mystery. Their sudden vanishing has left the community and their loved ones without closure. Anyone with information that could help solve this case is encouraged to contact the Arlington Heights Police Department at 847-368-5300. 18-year-old Tammy Lynn Leppert has been missing for nearly 39 years, as of 2022, and her disappearance remains one of the most puzzling unsolved cases. In 1983, Tammy was an up-and-coming actress living in Rockledge, Florida, with her family, and her future seemed incredibly bright. In 1982, she landed a role in the movie Spring Break, which grossed over $25 million at the box office. This role was a turning point for Tammy, who had already experienced success as a beauty queen throughout her childhood. Now, it appeared she was headed for stardom. However, an out-of-town party drastically changed the course of her life. After the success of Spring Break, Tammy attended a party without any adult supervision. According to her mother, Linda Curtis, Tammy returned from the party a completely different person. She became extremely paranoid, avoiding phone calls and looking at everyone around her with suspicion. Linda was deeply concerned for her daughter and pressed her about what was wrong. Tammy eventually responded, "I saw something awful, something really bad that I wasn't supposed to see." "Mom, what would you say if I told you someone was trying to harm me?" Despite Linda's repeated attempts to get more information, Tammy refused to elaborate, only saying that they were after her. As weeks passed, Tammy's behavior became more and more erratic. When she landed a small part in the film Scarface, her family and friends hoped the new project might help bring her back to normal. Unfortunately, it had the opposite effect. Just 4 days into filming, in March 1983, Tammy had a severe breakdown while filming a particularly graphic scene. The director sent Tammy home, and her mother took over her care again. Tammy's paranoia only escalated further. She refused to eat food from her own plate or drink anything from open containers, fearing that someone was trying to poison her. Her strange behavior continued, and eventually, she was admitted to Brevard County Mental Health Center in early July 1983. Linda and Tammy's friends did everything they could to help her, but doctors and local law enforcement were unable to find any direct threat to Tammy's life or any mental condition that might explain her actions. While on the Scarface set, Tammy had made rambling comments about money laundering, but the director couldn't make sense of what she was trying to convey. By July 6, 1983, Tammy had been released from the mental health facility, and things seemed to have calmed down, at least temporarily. On the morning of July 6, Tammy and her friend, Keith Roberts, got into his car and headed to the beach. According to Keith, they had an argument during the drive, and Tammy asked to be let out of the car. Keith complied and let her out near the Glass Bank building on State Road A1A in Cocoa Beach. Strangely, Tammy left behind her purse, ID, and other belongings, items she would have needed to make the 5-mile journey home. After getting out of the car, Tammy Lynn Leppert was never seen or heard from again. Her disappearance continues to baffle investigators. With no clear evidence, many theories have emerged over the years. The most prevalent theory is that Tammy witnessed something she shouldn't have at the party, possibly related to organized crime. Her mother, Linda, believed that her daughter either met with foul play or suffered amnesia and started a new life. According to the Cocoa Beach Police Department, they received 2 calls in the years following Tammy's disappearance from a woman claiming to be Tammy, who said she had run away and started a new life as a nurse. However, those close to Tammy heavily disputed these claims, as she was known to be squeamish around medical matters. Sadly, Linda Curtis passed away in 1995 without ever learning what happened to her daughter. Tammy's siblings and friends now continue the fight for answers and justice. Theories about her disappearance have linked Tammy to serial killers, organized crime, and the possibility that she voluntarily ran away. But without new evidence, it is likely that we may never know the truth. Anyone with information regarding Tammy's case is encouraged to contact the Cocoa Beach Police Department at 407-868-3269 or 321-868-3251. On May 24, 2000, 29-year-old Claudia Kirschhoch, an assistant editor for Frommer's Travel Guides in New York City, boarded a plane bound for Montego Bay, Jamaica. She was selected to join a travel junket at the New Sandals Holiday Resorts in Havana, Cuba. However, upon arriving in Montego Bay, the group discovered they could not continue to Cuba due to fully booked return flights to New York. Instead, Claudia and another writer, Tanya Grossinger, were rerouted to the Sandals Resort in Negril, Jamaica. 2 days later, on May 27th, Claudia was last seen walking along 7 Mile Beach at around 1 p.m. by a resort lifeguard. She was expected to return to work on June 2nd but failed, prompting concern. Claudia's parents, Fred and Mary, reported that she was missing after being unable to contact her and learning from her employer that she hadn't returned. During the initial investigation, police found that the only items missing from Claudia's belongings were a bikini, t-shirt, and radio, the same items she was last seen with on the beach. Her passport, return flight tickets, $180 in cash, credit cards, camera, and mobile phone were all left behind. Disturbingly, the hotel did not report Claudia's absence even after she missed her checkout date. Instead, her room was cleaned out, her belongings moved to the manager's office, and the room was sanitized and rented out again, potentially destroying crucial evidence. Further signs of mismanagement emerged as the investigation progressed. Claudia's mobile phone went missing after being moved from her room. A logbook, recording vehicle license plates at the resort, was also lost. Surveillance footage near Claudia's room had been accidentally taped over after she disappeared, further complicating the search for answers. Hotel staff also developed the film in her camera, but they reported finding nothing significant, leaving her family in the dark. As her parents desperately searched for answers, the Jamaican press painted Claudia as an adventurous risk-taker, suggesting she may have been responsible for her fate. The head of corporate public relations for Sandals Resorts, Leo Lambert, echoed this sentiment during a press conference, describing Claudia as a partier who may have run off with a local lover. Suspicion surrounding Lambert grew when it was discovered that he took 4 days off work following Claudia's disappearance and attempted to obtain a new passport during that time. He later claimed his actions were an effort to protect the resort and save his job. Tanya Grossinger, Claudia's travel companion, later revealed that Claudia had befriended a resort bartender named Anthony Grant. On the morning of May 27, Tanya and Claudia shared a final breakfast, during which Claudia mentioned she had gone on a date with Grant the previous night. They had visited a nightclub, smoked marijuana, and gone skinny dipping before Grant walked her back to the resort. Claudia declined a follow-up date, planning to stay in Jamaica until more flights became available. Authorities, assisted by the FBI, turned their attention to Grant. Initially, he denied going on a date with Claudia, later admitting to it after being caught in his lie, citing the resort's strict policy against employees dating guests. The day after Claudia vanished, Grant called in sick and didn't return to work for 4 days. During the investigation, a strand of Claudia's hair was found in Grant's Toyota Corolla, and sniffer dogs traced her scent to the trunk of the car and on a pair of gloves and boots at his residence. However, DNA testing on these items was inconclusive. A small amount of blood was found on a knife in Grant's home, but it was too little to be analyzed. Grant eventually agreed to a polygraph test, but the results were inconclusive, though he reportedly answered truthfully when asked if he killed Claudia. Despite the suspicious circumstances, Grant has never been named a suspect, although Claudia's parents believe he knows more than he has revealed. In 2001, Claudia's family received an anonymous letter claiming she had been given a date rape drug at a party with Grant and had died from an overdose. However, no evidence has been found to support this claim, and the letter's author has never been identified. Over the years, there have been numerous reported sightings of Claudia in various Jamaican villages, but none have been confirmed. In 2002, Claudia's family had her declared legally dead and filed a lawsuit against Sandals Resorts, accusing them of destroying evidence and causing emotional distress. A settlement was reached in 2007. Fred and Mary Kirschhoch have expressed their frustration with the Jamaican police, who they say have been uncooperative and have denied them access to case files. Claudia Kirschhoch was last seen on May 27, 2000, on 7 Mile Beach in Negril, Jamaica. She is a white woman with brown hair and brown eyes, standing 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighing 105 pounds at the time of her disappearance. She was wearing a blue bikini and t-shirt and carrying a portable radio. Claudia has a tattoo of a phoenix on her right hip. If she is still alive, she would be 51 years old. Anyone with information about Claudia's case is urged to contact the FBI Florida office at 305-944-9101. It was December 29, 1999, in Vinita, Oklahoma, when best friends Ashley Freeman and Lauria Bible, both teenagers, went missing. The day held special significance as it was Lauria's birthday. Sometime late on the 29th or early on the 30th, the Freeman residence was set ablaze. A neighbor, alarmed by the sight of the house engulfed in flames, quickly called the fire department. Lauria had informed her parents that she would be spending the day at Ashley's house, so when they were notified and arrived at the scene, they found the home reduced to ashes. Seeing Lauria's car parked near the driveway, her parents feared the worst, assuming their daughter had perished in the fire. However, to their shock, Lauria's body was not found. The only remains discovered were those of Kathy Freeman, Ashley's mother. In an interview with the media, Lauria's mother, Laureen, recalled the moment she learned of the situation. The county coroner told me there was only one body. I asked, have they found anybody else? And she said, no, they've looked, but there's no other bodies there. Lauria's father, Jay, also recounted the last time he saw his daughter. Lauria asked me, Daddy, is it all right if I spend the night with Ashley at the Freeman's home? I said, just make sure you're home by noon tomorrow. But noon tomorrow didn't happen the way it should have. The fact that Kathy Freeman was the only body initially found in the burned home was strange, but the situation grew even more mysterious when it was determined that Kathy had died from a shotgun wound to the head, not from the fire. This led investigators to believe the fire was intentionally set and that the missing individuals had been abducted. The day after the fire, Lauria's parents returned to the Freeman house to search for any clues that might lead them to their daughter. To their surprise, they discovered another body, which had been missed during the initial search. This body was later identified as Danny Freeman, Ashley's father and Kathy's husband. Like Kathy, Danny had also been killed by a shotgun blast. Laureen described the gruesome discovery, noting, he didn't have anything from the upper teeth all the way to the top of his head. That same day, authorities found Lauria's purse, which contained her driver's license and a few $100s in cash, reinforcing the belief that Lauria had been abducted. With Ashley's remains still missing, it was likely that she had also been taken. As months passed with little progress in the case, rumors began to circulate about a possible feud between the Freemans and the local sheriff's office. This speculation stemmed from the death of Danny's son, Shane, who had been shot and killed by an officer after stealing a truck and firearm from a neighbor. Although Shane's death was ruled justifiable, the Freemans were reportedly planning to file a wrongful death lawsuit against the law enforcement officers involved. This possibility gained traction when Danny's brother, Dwayne, shared a chilling memory. Danny put his finger in my face and said, if anything ever happens to me, look at the sheriff's department, and he was serious. He was in my face to drive it home with me. Dwayne added that authorities had threatened the family, claiming they could do whatever they wanted to them at any time. Despite this, polygraph tests administered to the sheriff's office staff cleared them of any involvement in the case. Another theory suggested that Danny Freeman was involved in illegal substance dealing, and the fire may have been the result of a deal gone wrong. However, Special Agent Steve Nutter expressed doubt, stating, if you wanted to consider that it was substance-related, nothing fits correctly. The very last thing that people who committed the murders would want to do would be to abduct the children. Over time, additional theories emerged, but a significant revelation came when a death row inmate named Jeremy Jones confessed to the murders of Danny and Kathy Freeman. When asked about his motive, Jeremy claimed he was repaying a favor to a friend. He also stated that he had taken Ashley and Lauria to Kansas, where he shot them and left their bodies in an abandoned mine. Although Jeremy provided authorities with the exact location of the mine, a thorough search of the area yielded no evidence of the girls, and Jeremy later recanted his confession, admitting he had lied to gain better food and privileges. In April 2018, another person of interest emerged, 66-year-old Ronnie Dean Busick. He was arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. The case against Ronnie also implicated 2 other men, Warren Welsh II and David Pennington, both of whom were deceased at the time. Witnesses came forward, claiming that Ronnie, Warren, and David had bragged about killing Ashley and Lauria, and that the girls were held in Warren's trailer for several days before being killed. The witnesses even reported that the men had shared Polaroids of the girls. The motive, according to these accounts, was that the Freemans were killed over substance money. Warren's girlfriend later informed police that he had kept a briefcase containing the Polaroids in question. In July 2020, Ronnie Busick pleaded guilty to being an accessory to the first-degree murders of Danny and Kathy Freeman, as well as to setting the fire and abducting Ashley and Lauria. He received a 15-year sentence, with 10 years to be served in prison and the remaining 5 on probation. However, Ronnie was released early in May 2023 for good behavior, serving less than 4 years of his 10-year prison sentence. While the culprits have been identified, the whereabouts of Ashley and Lauria's remains remain unknown. It seems that the truth may have died with Warren and David if they were indeed involved. In the quiet, rural town of Montgomery, Vermont, the evening of March 19, 2004, seemed like any other. But as night gave way to the early hours of March 20th, the life of 17-year-old Briana Alexender Maitland would change forever, leaving her family and community grappling with unanswered questions for years to come.
Mia Moran's going to join us live from the scene in Montgomery with more on this latest search. Mia, here's the question. Why are they out there today?
Well, Gus, detectives say there's no special reason they were back out here in Montgomery searching for signs of Briana Maitland in the fields and along the riverbank. They say they're actively investigating her disappearance despite uncovering little in the case in the past 5 years.
Briana was known as a free-spirited and determined young woman. Raised on a peaceful farm near the US-Canadian border, she grew up in an environment that valued independence and self-expression. Her parents, Bruce and Kelly Maitland, encouraged her to explore her passions and carve out her path in life. It wasn't surprising, then, when Briana decided to move out of her parents' home at the age of 17, seeking more freedom and proximity to her friends in a nearby town. Briana's parents trusted her judgment and believed in her ability to handle the responsibility of living on her own. She had shown discipline and strength, especially through her training in the martial art of jiu-jitsu. Confident in her abilities, Briana moved to live with a friend and transferred to a new high school, where most of her friends were enrolled. But it was during this time that Briana's life began to take a turn for the worse. By early 2004, Briana's life had become somewhat transient. She moved between the homes of various friends, and eventually dropped out of high school in February of that year. Despite this setback, she remained determined to improve her circumstances. Briana found work at 2 jobs, one at the Black Lantern Inn, where she was a regular employee, and another as a waitress at a small restaurant in St. Albans, Vermont. During this period, she moved in with a childhood friend, Jillian Stout, in Sheldon, Vermont, about 20 miles from her parents' home. Briana still harbored dreams of leaving rural Vermont for the excitement of city life. Realizing that her decision to drop out of high school could hinder these ambitions, she enrolled in a GED program, with plans to attend college afterward. Briana was also navigating the complexities of relationships, which, in the close-knit environment of a small town, could lead to conflicts. One such conflict arose between Briana and her friend, Keely Lacrosse, over a boy. Keely was upset that Briana had begun spending time with her ex-boyfriend, and tensions between the two escalated. This culminated in a physical altercation at a party, where Keely attacked Briana, leaving her with a broken nose, 2 black eyes, and a concussion. Despite Briana's training in jiu-jitsu, she did not defend herself during the assault, a fact that has puzzled many who knew her. The Cross has claimed that people have exaggerated the incidents over time, saying, "I hit her 2 times, she didn't fight back. It looks like I annihilated her, but I didn't. I hit her twice, and she didn't fight back. I said, 'You're not worth it,' and walked away. They look at me like I'm a monster, and I jumped her with a crew of women, but that's not what happened." Briana later pressed charges against Keely, but tragically, 3 weeks after the incident, she disappeared, deepening the mystery that still surrounds her case. On the morning of March 19, 2004, it appeared that Briana was taking steps toward a brighter future. she took her GED exam and celebrated by having lunch with her mother, Kelly. Briana was in good spirits, and the two spent the day shopping and running errands together. However, while they were in a checkout line, something outside caught Briana's attention. She abruptly told her mother she needed to step outside and left the store to investigate. When Kelly joined her outside a short time later, she found Briana visibly shaken and upset. Kelly chose not to press her daughter for details, respecting Briana's privacy. After their outing, Briana insisted on returning home to prepare for her evening shift at the Black Lantern Inn. Kelly dropped her off at Gillian Stout's home between 3:30 and 4 p.m. This would be the last time Kelly saw her daughter. Before heading to work, Briana left a note for Gillian, indicating that she would be home after her shift. Gillian, however, was leaving town for the weekend and wouldn't return until Monday, March 22nd. Briana arrived at work on time and completed her shift, clocking out at approximately 11:20 p.m. Her co-workers later reported that Briana seemed perfectly normal that evening, with no signs of distress. They invited her to join them for a late dinner, but Briana declined, citing the need to rest for her second job the following day. Briana left the Black Lantern Inn alone, and less than a mile away, her car was discovered the next morning in a bizarre and troubling condition. However, on the morning of March 20th, 2004, a Vermont state trooper responded to a report of an abandoned car at an old, dilapidated property known locally as the Old Dutchburn House in Richford, Vermont. The vehicle, a green 1985 Oldsmobile registered to Kelly Maitland, had been backed into the side of the barn on the property, causing damage to both the car and the building. A piece of plywood from the barn's window was found resting on the car's trunk. Inside the car, two of Briana's uncashed paychecks were on the passenger seat, while a water bottle, loose change, and an unsmoked cigarette were found nearby outside the vehicle. Despite these unusual circumstances, the responding officer did not run the vehicle's license plate or registration to identify its owner. He assumed it was a case of drunk driving and had the car towed to a local garage. This oversight, coupled with the fact that Briana's roommate, Gillian, was out of town, meant that Briana's disappearance went unreported for several days, a critical lapse in the investigation. Gillian only realized something was wrong when she returned home on Monday, March 22nd, and found that Briana had never returned after work. After contacting Briana's parents and learning that they had not heard from her either, the Maitlands filed a missing persons report with the Vermont State Police on March 23rd. It wasn't until 2 days later, on March 25th, when Briana's parents brought photos of her to the police, that authorities made the connection between Briana and the abandoned Oldsmobile. The Maitlands immediately identified the car as Briana's, confirming their worst fears. Initially, the police theorized that Briana had run away, dismissing the possibility of foul play. The scene at the Old Dutchburn House was not treated as a crime scene, and no photographs were taken by law enforcement. Fortunately, some passers-by who had found the scene suspicious had taken photos of the car, which later became crucial pieces of evidence. Several witnesses reported seeing Briana's car at the Old Dutchburn House between 11:30 p.m. on March 19th and the early hours of March 20th. One man said the car's headlights were on when he passed by, while another reported seeing the turn signal flashing. However, neither witness saw anyone in or around the vehicle. The investigation into Briana's disappearance quickly grew cold. Rumors began to swirl, and the Maitland family received numerous calls from individuals claiming to know Briana's whereabouts, but none of these leads panned out. One particularly alarming tip suggested that Briana was being held against her will at a drug house in Berkshire, Vermont, about 10 miles from Montgomery. Although the police raided the home and found drugs, they found no sign of Briana. It was during this time that rumors about Briana's involvement with drugs began to surface. Some claimed she had been experimenting with crack cocaine, a charge that her family vehemently denied. However, the area was known for its drug problems, and Briana was known to have been acquainted with 2 local drug dealers, Raymond Ryans and Nathaniel Charles Jackson. In the years following Briana's disappearance, an anonymous woman came forward with a chilling story. She claimed that Ryans and Jackson had killed Briana after she confronted them over a debt they owed her. According to the woman, the men attacked Briana, dismembered her body, and disposed of her remains at a pig farm. This story, while horrifying, has never been corroborated. In 2007, the FBI took a renewed interest in the case, officially stating that Briana's disappearance was the result of foul play and that the scene at the old Dutchburn house had likely been staged to mislead investigators. Despite this, no arrests have been made, and Briana's fate remains a mystery. Over the years, many theories have emerged about what happened to Briana. Some believe she ran away, though this seems unlikely given the circumstances. Others point to her connections to local drug dealers, or even suggest a link between her disappearance and that of Maura Murray, another young woman who vanished just 90 miles away a month earlier. Some suspect Keely Lacrosse, though police have stated she has been cleared of any involvement. In 2006, security footage from a casino surfaced, showing a woman who resembled Briana, but this lead was never pursued. In 2016, police announced that they had recovered DNA from Briana's car, which they believed belonged to the perpetrator, but no further information has been released. As of today, Briana Alexandra Maitland remains missing, and her case remains unsolved. Her family continues to hope for answers, and for the day when Briana's story will finally have an ending, one that brings them the closure they deserve. However, recently, the FBI and Vermont State Police have intensified efforts to resolve Briana Maitland's disappearance. As of March 2024, they have announced a $40,000 reward for information leading to her recovery. This initiative marks a significant step, as they are urging anyone with knowledge of the case to come forward, emphasizing that no tip is too small. This renewed push aims to generate new leads in this decades-old mystery, which remains unsolved but is still actively investigated by authorities. In the months leading up to her disappearance in February 2008, Marilyn Bergeon underwent a troubling transformation. A highly educated young woman, fluent in 3 languages, she had settled in Montreal after earning a degree in media arts and technology. Despite living in a neighborhood known for its challenges, including criminal activities, Marilyn had managed without incident for 2 years. However, by late 2007, her demeanor changed noticeably. Close friends observed Marilyn becoming increasingly withdrawn and anxious. During a visit just before Christmas, a university friend noticed her deep sadness. At a party, Marilyn experienced a breakdown when memories surfaced, hinting at a recent traumatic event she refused to disclose. By February 10th, she reached out to her mother, indicating she could no longer stay in Montreal. Without revealing the cause, she abruptly left for Quebec City, where her parents lived. Concerned for her well-being, Marilyn's parents sought mental health assistance. She began seeing a therapist who recommended hospitalization. However, before arrangements could be made, Marilyn disappeared. On February 17th, after a brief walk alone, she attempted to withdraw money from an ATM in an unfamiliar backpack. Hours later, she was sighted looking distraught in a coffee shop 20 kilometers away. Despite initial assumptions of suicide, subsequent sightings in Hawkesbury, 2 years later, suggested she might still be alive, often seen with a young man under distressing circumstances. Marilyn's family remained steadfast in their search, convinced she is out there somewhere, hoping for her safe return. Amos Mortier was a student who mysteriously disappeared from his home in Wisconsin in 2004. It wasn't until after his disappearance that his mother discovered he had been leading a double life. This has complicated the still unsolved case. To his family, Amos was an outdoor enthusiast with a deep love of music. He was studying ecology and botany at Madison Area Technical College, MATC, and had plans to transfer to a university soon. Amos was passionate about sustainable living and farming, even going so far as to churn his butter rather than buy it. He enjoyed hiking and had recently returned from a trip when he went missing. His closest companion was his dog, Mero, who was often by his side on his many hiking and camping trips. The bond between Amos and Mero was so strong that even the local bank allowed Mero to accompany Amos inside. On November 6, 2004, Amos went hiking with two friends, with Mero by his side. Everything seemed normal, and they all returned to Amos's home without any issues. However, in the days that followed, Amos's friends tried to reach him multiple times but received no response. His mother also hadn't heard from him, and he missed his classes and an important exam. Concerned, his friends decided to check on him on November 13th. When they arrived at his home, they found the front door locked but managed to enter through a side door. Inside, they encountered a puzzling scene. A record was still spinning on the turntable, and it appeared that Amos had been in the middle of hanging pictures when he abruptly left. All of his belongings were still there, but Amos and Mero were gone. The next day, the police were finally called in, but by then, some of Amos's friends had already removed a safe and a few other items from his home. The safe, however, turned out to be empty. Shortly after Amos was reported missing, Mero was found wandering the streets by a neighbor and was taken in. The dog seemed unharmed, but the fact that Mero was alone raised alarms among those who knew Amos. Initially, Amos's mother speculated that he might have gotten into an accident while walking Mero. The dog had a habit of bolting if not on a leash, and Amos might have run into the path of a car while trying to catch him. However, the police soon uncovered a darker possibility. They discovered that many of Amos's associates had ties to illegal activities, leading them to believe that his disappearance might be related to these connections. There was some evidence suggesting that someone owed Amos money, and it was theorized that he might have been lured to a remote location and harmed. Years later, someone confessed to doing just that, but the police were uncertain whether the confession was credible. Meanwhile, Amos's mother held on to a more hopeful theory. In June 2005, 3 nurses reported seeing a man at a music festival who matched Amos's description. The man appeared confused and complained of memory problems. The festival featured bands that Amos was known to enjoy, which could have drawn him there. His friends began attending other music festivals in hopes of finding more clues, but their efforts were unsuccessful. Since Amos's disappearance, there have been no confirmed sightings and no definitive explanation for what happened to him. The investigation into his case remains open. Amos is described as being 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighing 130 pounds at the time he vanished. He had a scar on his forehead and wore brown-framed glasses. Anyone with information about his case is urged to contact the Fitchburg Police Department at 608-270-4300. The search for answers continues, with his family and friends still hoping for closure. 16-year-old Shelly-Ann Boxu lived in Hinton, Alberta, with her parents, Muriel and Sandy, and her older brother, Tim. Petite at barely 5 feet tall and weighing less than 100 pounds, her small stature didn't match her vibrant personality. She loved children and dreamed of becoming a teacher. Shelly-Ann's cheerful spirit could brighten anyone's day, and she was always eager to help others, treating everyone equally regardless of their circumstances. Shelly-Ann's trusting nature worried her mother, Muriel, who feared it might have contributed to her sudden disappearance on May 3, 1983. That evening, Shelly-Ann had been at her boyfriend's home in what is now the Hillcrest Trailer Park. Around 8 p.m., she called her mother to say a friend was giving her a ride home and requested her favorite Hungarian noodle dish for dinner. An hour later, her boyfriend called, surprised Shelly-Ann wasn't home yet. This alarming call made Muriel realize something had gone terribly wrong. The friend who was supposed to give Shelly-Ann a ride home couldn't make it, so she decided to walk the 4 miles from the trailer park on Highway 16 to her home off Highway 40. Her father, Sandy, and brother, Tim, went out searching by car, while Muriel searched on foot, battling strong winds that made it difficult to call out for Shelly-Ann. The authorities were notified, and the search began. A witness reported seeing Shelly-Ann walking west on the north side of Highway 16 towards her house. Despite extensive efforts by family, friends, neighbors, and authorities, the dense woodland area complicated the search. A few days later, items belonging to Shelly-Ann were found near the Athabasca River, about 3 miles from her home. These included her jacket, bra, pantyhose, library card, and a library book. Despite these discoveries, Shelly-Ann remained missing. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, interviewed several persons of interest, but no arrests were made. For the first decade, the RCMP stayed in contact with Shelly-Ann's family. However, after the 10th anniversary of her disappearance, communication ceased for about 15 years. In 2010, her case was reviewed to see if it was connected to the Highway of Tears disappearances and murders in British Columbia, but it was determined to be unrelated. The RCMP made another public appeal in 2013, on the 30th anniversary of her disappearance. Sadly, that same year, Shelly-Ann's brother Tim passed away from cancer. Shelly-Ann's case is now with the RCMP's Historical Homicide Unit. They have re-interviewed witnesses, investigated new tips, and re-examined evidence with modern forensic techniques. DNA evidence has been found, and the RCMP considers the person who left this DNA a key person of interest. However, the contributor has not yet been identified. Sergeant Jason Zazalak of the Historical Homicide Unit emphasized in 2020 that the case remains open. This case touches the heart. "We haven't given up," he said. Given the passage of time and the lack of evidence that Shelly-Ann is living elsewhere, both the RCMP and her family believe she is no longer alive. Muriel, Shelly-Ann's mother, expressed in 2020, "I'm not looking for justice. I don't think I'll get it. I just want to find my daughter's remains so I can lay her to rest and give her peace. For us, there is no such thing as closure, but there is peace. All we want is peace." Amy Billig was born on January 9, 1957, in Oyster Bay, New York, to Nathaniel Solomon and Susan (née Chern) Billig. Her father managed an art gallery, while her mother was an interior designer and art dealer. The Billig family practiced the Jewish faith. Amy's birth was a moment of profound joy for her mother, Susan, who had endured the heartbreak of 4 miscarriages before Amy's arrival. Susan often described Amy as a warm-hearted and spiritual young woman, deeply connected to nature and embodying the flower child spirit of her time. Amy had diverse and artistic interests. She loved playing the flute and guitar, was an avid reader, and enjoyed writing poetry. Additionally, she trained dolphins at the Miami Seaquarium, showcasing her unique connection with animals. Amy shared a close and affectionate relationship with her mother. Susan cherished these moments and often found herself in awe of her daughter, reflecting, "I would look at her and think, what did I do to deserve such a beautiful thing?" Concerned about the rising crime rates in New York City, the Billig family moved in May 1969. They settled in Coconut Grove, Florida, seeking a safer environment. Nathaniel Billig established an art gallery in their new location, while Susan continued her work as an art dealer and interior designer. Their new home was a comfortable middle-class residence. The Billings quickly became involved in various cultural organizations in their new community, contributing to the vibrant local scene. By the early 1970s, they were active participants in these groups, reflecting their commitment to the arts and community engagement. Amy, along with her younger brother Joshua, who was born on February 14, 1958, attended local private schools, receiving a solid education in their new surroundings. This move not only provided them with safety but also enriched their lives with new cultural and educational opportunities. On the afternoon of Tuesday, March 5, 1974, Amy Billig came home from school, had a yogurt, and then called her father to ask for $2 to cover a lunch date with friends at nearby Peacock Park. Her father agreed, and Amy changed her clothes and began hitchhiking to her father's art gallery on Commodore Plaza to borrow the money to meet her friends for lunch. Construction workers saw Amy hitchhiking at the corner of Poinciana Street and Main Highway in Coconut Grove, near her home, early that afternoon. Sadly, this would be the last confirmed sighting of her. Amy never made it to her father's gallery. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing a denim miniskirt and cork platform sandals. By the evening of March 5, Amy's mother, Susan, and her brother, Joshua, grew worried when she didn't return home. Their concern started when Amy's friends asked Susan why Amy hadn't shown up for their planned lunch. This worry turned into panic when Nathaniel, Amy's father, came home and shared that Amy had never arrived at his art gallery to borrow the money for lunch as she had said she would. When Susan called the local police, they assured her they would start an investigation if Amy wasn't back by the next morning. Detective Michael Gonzalez told her, "Don't panic. Call back if Amy isn't home by morning." By 6 a.m. the next day, Susan, now frantic, reported Amy missing again to the Miami Police Department, and this time, they launched an investigation. Law enforcement began investigating Amy's disappearance immediately after Susan's call on March 6, with both of Amy's parents, along with family and close friends, actively involved in the search. They quickly questioned Amy's friends and searched places she usually went to, but these efforts led to no results. Since Amy had few personal belongings with her when she vanished, investigators quickly determined her disappearance was likely against her will. Given Amy's habit of hitchhiking around the neighborhood, they suspected she might have willingly gotten into her abductor's vehicle. The only physical evidence found was Amy's Instamatic camera, which a college student, also hitchhiking, discovered on March 18 in a grassy area near the Wildwood exit on Florida's Turnpike, about 250 miles northwest of Miami. The camera's film was processed, but most of the photos were overexposed and didn't provide helpful information. One photo showed a light-colored pickup truck parked in front of a vine-covered building, and another showed a white van. Despite this, investigators couldn't locate the vehicles or identify the building in the pictures. In their desperate search for Amy, Susan and Nathaniel Billig took multiple steps, including hiring a private investigator, though this effort did not produce any solid leads. They printed and distributed hundreds of missing person posters across Miami-Dade County. They also handed out flyers in both English and Spanish throughout South Florida, hoping to find any information about Amy's whereabouts. The family kept a constant vigil near the phone, usually with Susan close by, in case Amy or her abductors called. Susan frequently contacted the Miami Police Department for updates and held several news conferences to keep the public aware of Amy's disappearance. On March 10, 5 days after Amy went missing, the first newspaper headline appeared in local papers. It mentioned that both the police and Amy's family suspected she might have been kidnapped, possibly by a motorcycle gang. That evening, a benefit concert raised $850 to help with search efforts, and a fund was established at a local bank for search expenses. A $1,000 reward was also offered for any information about Amy's whereabouts, leading to several tips from the public, but none were confirmed. In the weeks that followed, the Billig family received $2,000 in donations from friends, neighbors, and colleagues to support the search. A music festival organized by Amy's high school raised an additional $1,500 to aid in the private investigation. Former neighbors from New York also contributed $1,000 to help with the search efforts. Police and Susan Billig received tips indicating that Amy might have been abducted by members of the Outlaws or Pagans motorcycle clubs. Both gangs, known for violent crimes against women, had traveled through Coconut Grove on the day Amy disappeared, heading to a bike festival in Daytona. This theory was considered the most likely explanation for Amy's disappearance. On March 16, a caller identifying herself as Susan Johnson claimed Amy had been taken by the Outlaws Motorcycle Club. A family friend also reported hearing from a lawyer who had worked for the Outlaws about a rumor of a teenage girl recently abducted from Miami. With this lawyer's help, Susan arranged a meeting with 2 Outlaw members, pleading for Amy's return. They assured her that if Amy was with the Outlaw Nation, they would return her. However, a few days later, they called to tell Susan to forget the whole thing. 16 days after Amy's disappearance, her family received a call demanding $30,000 in ransom, claiming she had been kidnapped. Susan, convinced by a subsequent call where a voice she believed to be Amy's pleaded, "Mama, Mama, please," borrowed the money from friends. A meeting was set up at the Fontainebleau Hotel on March 22. The caller was arrested when Susan refused to hand over the money without proof that he had Amy. The extortionists were 16-year-old twins, Charles and Lawrence Glasser, who had no connection with Amy's disappearance. Amy's parents received disturbing calls from a man claiming she had been abducted by a sex ring and held captive. This torment continued until 1995, when the FBI traced a call to Henry Johnson Blair, a U.S. Customs worker. Blair, who blamed his behavior on alcoholism and OCD, admitted to harassing the family but denied any knowledge of Amy's disappearance. He served 2 years in prison for his harassment, and Susan Billig settled a lawsuit against him for $5 million in 1992. Blair's connection to Amy was questioned because her journal mentioned a man named Hank, who asked her to run away to South America, a nickname and location tied to Blair. His van also resembled one in photos found in Amy's camera, but no conclusive link was ever made. In the early 1990s, a private investigator reported that an American biker in England tried to sell a mute American girl, which could have been Amy. However, this lead went nowhere after the investigator passed away. Theories about Amy's fate suggest either biker gang members or Blair might know the truth. Some believe the bikers were only harassing the family, while others think Blair's involvement is too coincidental. Unfortunately, Amy's parents never found answers. Nathaniel Billig passed away in the early 1990s, and Susan died in 2005. Amy's case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries and in Susan's book Without a Trace, The Disappearance of Amy Billig, A Mother's Search for Justice.